was playing with an ideal. The ideal in this particular one goes from daytime to well into the nighttime, and just showing the transition of going from day into night with the color and so I actually didn't paint in some of the other cactus into the pieces because I wanted to let all the three-dimensional pieces become the cactus like it would actually be. So we'll see. I'm still playing with it. We'll see how it goes.
Hello, guys. You're watching Vexit, and I'm here with a great man, Roger. I went to Scottsdale Community College many years ago, and Roger was a instructor, professor that was influencing me greatly because he is a tremendous artist and tremendous painter. And I was lucky enough that he was kind enough to let me interview him and talk about his life journey and how he was educating people. So, what got you started into art?
I have to say that I started drawing when I was 3 years old. It was one of those things, as a child, your parents, your grandparents, other people, they give you stuff to keep you busy and all of that. And I remember very distinctly ended up drawing a series of little cars. They were very primitive cars, but they were cars, very identifiable as cars. And I think because even as a child, something about automobiles fascinated me. I remember doing a whole page and jumping up and showing my grandmother at the time. And I lived with my grandparents like for the first 10 years of my life, along with my mom and sister. And but I remember jumping up and was like, look, Grandma, here's cars. And for something reason, I just kept drawing and drawing at that point. And then by the time I was 6, my mom gave me a painting set, an oil painting set. She knew nothing about oil painting. So I was painting pictures like on notebook paper and stuff like that, because trying to figure out how to use them because she didn't know. And but I just kept doing it for the longest time. And then I think somewhere between the age of 3 and 6, I actually was at my grandparents' house, and they had a set of encyclopedias. And encyclopedias back then, most of the time, were just plain black and white. You didn't have color stuff like we do today. But I was actually laying on the floor, and I was looking at the A encyclopedia, and I got to the art section. And I remember looking at the pictures and everything, and some thought went through my head, even as a child, just thinking, one of these days, you'll have your work in museums. And I just thought, but as a child, that's like, wow, that's a big dream.
Yeah.
And everything. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And then I don't think I never had that thought again for years and years and years. And I wasn't even going to do art. Art to me was kind of like breathing because I came from a family that could do everything. So
Right.
everyone was artistic. People could do music, people could crochet, they could make quilts. My grandmother would sew our clothing to wear. Everyone could work on cars, mechanical things, build houses. I helped my grandfather build a house when I was 12 years old.
That's awesome. That's a
So,
great experience.
so art was just kind of like another part of everything else that you just did. Like it was just like turning on the TV if you wanted to do something. So I never really thought about it as something really serious. And even when I went off to college, I was looking at everything else but art.
What did you go to college for?
Um, well, I went because all my family wanted me to go.
Okay, fair.
So I think that's the real way to think about it. They wanted me to go more than I wanted to go. But
Right.
on the other hand, I also had an interest too. I didn't feel like I wanted to just do anything with my whole life, but I didn't know what that was, I don't think. And so when I got to college, I started looking at all kinds of other majors like cultural anthropology or world religions or different things like that. Um, and quite frankly, I guess from a Native perspective, a sense of spirituality as well as being raised in a Christian home, I always had a deep sense of spiritual awareness about things that were all around me. And one summer, my wife was working for Graceland University, and I should have been doing some kind of summer job. I was in between classes. She'd graduated ahead of me. And so I was kind of goofing off, and I was bored actually. And so I decided I would paint a painting over at our apartment where we were living across from the university. And I ran out of a color. I had an art locker that was over in the art building, because anyone that took any kind of a humanities class to fulfill, pardon me, an art class or whatever to help fulfill their credits, then you had an art locker. So I had paints over there. I walked across the street and went to get the paints out, and the department chair came out. His name was Les White, and he said to me, he's like, "Roger, what are you doing over here?" And I was like, well, I'm getting some paints out. But it was the way he said it to me, I almost kind of felt like he had a real father figure about him, a real authority kind of figure, but awesome guy. And it was almost like, I thought, hey, am I in trouble for something? And he's like, no. He's like, you need to come into my life drawing class and draw right now. And I'm like, I can't do that because I'm not an art major.
Right.
And I'm on summer break, and you've got a class going, and that wouldn't be fair to students. And we had like this dialogue for about 5 minutes in the hallway. Students were on break, and he's like, no, you got to come in. And I was like, okay, I can come in. He convinced me, and I said, when? He goes, how about tomorrow? And I'm like, what time's the class? It's like 8 to noon, and we're doing the life model. And I'd never drawn the life model before.
Okay.
And so I was like, I showed up the next day, and 8 o'clock, went in, started drawing. So he's walking around correcting students and everything, just kept, here, your proportions need this, the foreshortening here needs to be changed. You can model it like this a little bit, and so forth. He just walked by mine and just looked at my work and not say anything to me. And I'm like, why did you invite me into the class? Because you're not even saying anything to me. And that went on for the entire class, for the
Really?
4 hours. He never said a word to me. He just walked by. He'd just stop by and like, and just really look. And then he'd just gone by, and he's talking to everyone else. And I thought, well, this is crazy. So class is over, and he says, hey, can you stay for 5 minutes, lay out all your drawings on the floor for me? And so I'm like, yeah, sure. We're in a big old building. And so I just laid everything out that I drew during that 4-hour time period. And he just stands there and just kind of does one of these numbers where he's like, just really looking. And then he just stops and says, you know what? He says, you just really get it.
Wow.
He says, I don't see very many people who draw the human figure the way that you draw the figure. He says, you look like you've been drawing it your whole life.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Kind of thing. And he goes, I want you to come back tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, I can't do that because, I'm not an art major and blah, 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 and having that whole conversation with them. And but he convinced me, and I said, okay, I'll come back one more time because I really don't care, but I'll do it because you asked me to do it. And so I went back the next day, same thing. I just drew for the 4 whole hours, and he didn't say anything to me. He'd just do the same thing, just walk by, look at my work and everything. And but during the break time, it was about 2 hours in the class. They took a long break for the model, and I just stepped back from my easel to kind of just really examine the piece, make sure I had everything right about it. I was the only one in the studio at that point, and I had a perfect God moment.
Right.
And I heard a perfect still small voice just resonate through my whole body. It just went from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, and it said, if you get really good at drawing the human figure, you could say a lot to the world about your culture.
That's awesome.
And I had the greatest sense of peace just go from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm supposed to be an art major.
That's awesome.
And this is like my junior year. I was actually getting ready to transfer to Western Washington University. I was going to become a religion major at that point.
Okay.
And so, I was thinking, oh man, I need to talk to my wife, tell Deb, I'm going to change my major, and so I told her what happened that day at school. And she got it because we had other kinds of experiences like that together in our lives. And so she's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to stay here and be an art major. So I crammed all my art in 1 year.
Really?
Yeah. So all the upper division classes and everything, I crammed everything that I could take into one single year.
Wow.
So I just lived, eat, and breathed in the art department. I probably slept about maybe 3 hours a night for a year.
So you totally immersed yourself.
Totally immersed myself. Debbie would call me sometimes at the school. Back then we had one single phone in the art building, and if other students were up there working, the buildings were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and people would just yell your name, if the phone rang, hey, McKinney,
That's awesome.
your wife's on the phone, that kind of thing. And she's like, hey, are you gonna come home tonight? And I'm like, what time is it? It'd be like 12:30. Oh, give me 30 more minutes. But it'd be usually like 3:30 in the morning or something, and I'd go home and get back up at like 6 and be back down the art department by 8 and do it. So that changed the course of my life.
I bet.
Just through that experience. And
what it is about art that draws you in? Is it just being able to express yourself?
Boy, that's a good question. I think it's a whole bunch of things. I think one is about being able to express yourself. But I think there's, for me personally, there's something about it that is not only inspiring, but it's also healing. I think healing for the soul, but also for others. And mainly because, some people have this, how would I call it? You have a drive within you to produce, and it's like people who hear music or anything like that. You see things, you have that drive to get it out, and you have this whole internal abstract emotions that are within you, and somehow you want to bring it out into a physical reality to tell everyone that what you're thinking and how you're feeling and all that. But there's another aspect of it, though, that drives me, which is at another time and place, I had another experience where another God moment where I was told in the beginning, when I created you, I gave you these gifts to share in this lifetime.
Wow.
And that if you do it, it will not only bring inspiration to you, but it'll bring that inspiration to others. And I think it's kind of along the lines like Einstein always said that inspiration is more powerful than knowledge, because it's something that with knowledge we know what is, but inspiration brings the possibility of what can be. And so I think that's, for me, it's kind of two things. So it's one is, I have all this stuff inside of me that needs to be expressed,
right?
But then I feel like there's something higher that's telling me, oh, guess what? If you do this, this will bless people.
That's
and
awesome.
And then there's another aspect of that creative process for me personally, and that is, I've heard our tribal elders say sometimes, just because you think of it doesn't mean that you should make it. Wow. So that calls for a lot of control, you might say, a lot of personal discipline, a lot of discernment, a lot of wisdom about, well, what should I be making? Because art is powerful, and a lot of people just don't. I mean, if we want to take it to a higher level of things, and even in a scientific level of thinking about art, everything has energy in it. Everything has frequency in it. So every time you pick up a paintbrush and you're actually picking up paint pigment and all that, there's energy in that,
right?
And it's matter. And so we can get into like all this quantum physics aspect of it and everything, but the thing is, you're taking that and you're rearranging it in some aspect,
right?
And you're physically rearranging all that energy and everything into something that looks like an image. And then and a lot of times I always heard it through school, which, art has a life of its own, and let the piece tell you what it needs. Well, a lot of people don't really stop and think about that, but, well, wait a second. If I'm taking real stuff that has energy in it. And from a native perspective, everything is living. And so I'm taking some stuff that's
Wow.
living, I'm rearranging it in some fashion. Can it actually speak to people? Can it communicate to them in a way that attracts their attention, not just by looking at it, but be in some place, like I've been in places where maybe I'm in a museum and I'm like, wow, I feel like someone's staring down my back right now. And I have to turn around and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go over and look at that piece of artwork.
Wow.
And I will go over and examine it because
Mhm.
I'm thinking some artist has taken their own energy and rearranged all this other energy and matter into a piece that not only communicates visually with us, but maybe it's communicating on a deeper level with us. And a lot of people just don't think of that. Inanimate objects still, at least from a native perspective, and even I know now through a quantum physics perspective, everything is alive. Everything has spirit.
Dude, you
And
just
so,
shook my whole world right now.
and so, and so, that's, so when I create, I don't just create anything. I really give it a lot of thought about what I'm creating. I'm prayerful about what I create.
Do you have a favorite Bible verse that you look to, or
Oh,
that
wow.
maybe inspires you?
There are pieces that inspire me, like Romans, be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Okay,
That there, and what kind of things renew your mind?
right?
Prayer, fasting, study, being creative, can renew your mind. Taking time to be quiet,
Right?
things like that. So, I just think of there's a lot of things about even scripture that is very inspiring, and I actually see a lot of scripture as being very native in the way that the scriptures are written, very much align with a lot of native thinking in a lot of ways. So, and
What tribe do you belong to?
I'm Kickapoo. I'm actually tribally enrolled as Kickapoo, but
Okay.
I'm from Kansas, but I'm actually a mixture.
Okay.
So it'd be one of those things. I'm tribally enrolled at Kickapoo, so I'm federally recognized as Kickapoo, but I'm Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Shawnee, Cherokee, and on my mom's side it's the Cherokee, and also I'm a 10th generation direct descendant of Pocahontas on my mom's side of the family.
Awesome.
So 11 generations from Chief Powhatan, who ran the
Wow.
Powhatan Confederacy. But so, and then I also have, I don't know, I think I've got Scottish and Western European and some others actually on both sides of my family. So,
Right.
you get, if you look into DNA or
Right.
things like that, it's like, hey, no one's pure blooded.
No,
anyway.
not especially not in the United States.
No,
Far from it.
no, far from it. But yeah.
Are there? I noticed with your colors, that it's far from monotone. I get energy from looking at your paintings, so I totally understand when you're talking about the energy coming back. Do you think? As obviously your tribe or your native heritage does influence your paintings. Is there any stories that you've told from that comes to mind?
Yeah. So, color wise, yeah, I've always been attracted to bright color. I have to say that. And I would look back at pictures even as a kid that I was painting. I was already painting bright like this. And some of my professors would always say, man, your stuff is so bold. You just need to get it on, like right on, because it's just so bright and that. And I guess I'd say, I paint with a real vibrant palette, that kind of thing. But as far as the stories go, so I do try to tell a lot of stories. So some things, like maybe the one behind you is about dance. Though, was I exaggerated the size of her figure because I wanted her to feel monumental. Because the actual dancer, she was really slender and trim, and most powwow dancers are, because it just burns up so much of your body energy from dancing. and everything. But I just wanted her to feel like there was just this volume of beauty about her, and so I made her oversized, you might say. Her head's probably actually more proportionate to the way we would look at people, but then I kind of expanded her body as it came down, almost like she's a mountain, because I just wanted to show the beauty of that in the dance, and when they're spinning around and their shawls are spreading out and so forth, the fringes and everything. So that's how that piece came about.